world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is October 17th, 2012. And tonight, I am honored to welcome back my guest from last Wednesday night, who was gracious enough to give me 2 hours of her time last week and agreed afterwards to give me another 2 hours because there just wasn't enough time to go over the information we were discussing. Stephanie Sledge. Stephanie, welcome back to the broadcast.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
There was so much information that we were going over last week about the Jared Lee Loughner case that I asked you after the broadcast last week if you wanted to come back on and actually do like a part two, because there was just you were sending me links to articles and stuff that you had written, and I was just blown away. And like I told you last week, ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie put together this huge report. It's over 400 pages long. Stephanie, tell them where they can get it. Plug your website and everything really quick.
Well, you can visit www.thegovernmentrag.com. And on the left-hand side of the page at the top is investigations. And you can click on that page. And on the page, you'll find information about my official report called Apple Zebra 11. And you can make a donation, and you can order a copy of my book.
And I urge everybody to do so. And if you actually make a donation, I think it's over $25. You get a free copy of it anyway, regardless. So just do that. It works out. You help her, and you get this information, which I guarantee you will not get anywhere else. And it does. I don't want to hear anybody whine or complain that, oh, well, why do I have to donate $25 or why do I have to give anything to get it? Because that's a lot of work, and it costs money to do this, and it helps fund her doing further investigations. So I urge you to do it. Stephanie's not making money off this, and that's why I support what she does. If you notice, I support people that aren't in this for the money, they're in this for the information, and even if they need a little bit of financial assistance once in a while, I'll help them with that, giving them the promotion. I do that because she's real. I've talked to her off air. She's the real deal. She's a real good person, so support her. All right. Stephanie, one of your articles blew me away. It's titled Jared Lee Loughner Takes Plea, Game Over. Real Facts Suppressed. Now, we talked about this last week, how I said, it's very interesting how everything's tied up with a nice red bow and it's all done. He pleaded guilty. But in your article, you list a bunch of different facts about the Jared Lee Loughner, the whole investigation, the shooting, Gabrielle Giffords, whatever, that were not reported and covered up by the media. And either not reported by the media, like, sticking their fingers in their ears, closing their eyes, and la 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 la, or facts were actually twisted and changed. Now, a lot of some of this stuff, I don't think anybody's ever heard. I don't think anybody's ever heard, like Jared Lee Loughner never appeared on the Pima County Sheriff's Department booking roster on the day of the shooting. Huh? Isn't that like a red flag? Would you consider that to be something that sticks out?
Well, absolutely, and it did from the get-go. And the reason why I checked was just simply because most people that get arrested, if their county is online, usually you can go on there and verify what time they were arrested. A lot of times it'll have like the charges that they've been charged with. And I checked for days and months, and it turned into a year, and he never really did show up at all. His name did not appear on the roster following the shooting, or even that night, or the next day, or he just his name never appeared.
Now, the other thing that I noticed in the article, and this was something we brought up last week, and I looked into this in between last week and this week, and you weren't kidding. There's a lot of people that say, hey, that picture of him is not even what he looks like. And that's not the guy there's people that were witnesses that said that they didn't, the guy that they keep showing with the bald head and the bug eyes, the evil guy, that evil looking, scary guy, crazy guy, oh my God, gunman, he's going to come get me. That's the message they're trying to convey to the general public. There's a lot of people saying that's not even the guy that was doing the shooting that day.
No, I believe the pictures that they released, one from Pima County and then the other from the marshal's office, definitely were different pictures. And you can clearly see that. There were pictures released where Jared Lee Loughner had green eyes. There were pictures where he's had blue eyes, brown eyes. There's only one picture that I believe is really, truly Jared Lee Loughner, and it was when he was doing a fundraiser, and I believe it was for a book festival. And that picture, I do believe, is Jared Lee Loughner, but these pictures and a lot of the other pictures that have been released, I really don't think that it really is Loughner.
And you brought up a really good point that a lot of his friends and people that knew him said that wasn't him. And yet there's silence on this. It's, he admitted to it in court. He pled guilty. But have you ever seen any video of him? I don't recall ever seeing any video of this guy sitting in court. I don't even recall actually seeing a real photograph of him in a courtroom. I only recall drawings, the little court artists, whatever the hell they're called, that do the drawings. I've never actually seen a picture, a real picture, or a video. I mean, they could have faked it and put it on a soundstage or whatever if you wanted to go to that extreme, but that was never even there. That wasn't even, it's just a drawing. That's all you have. There is no physical, I have never seen any physical evidence of this guy even in a courtroom. So how do we know that this whole, you know what I mean? How do we know that this whole thing isn't just a huge psyop? It really, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. There really is.
Well, yeah, there definitely is a lot of questions that need to be answered and asked, because nobody's really asking these questions. And that is alarming that, this stuff is flashed right before our eyes on TV and nobody's really paying attention, or very few at least are paying attention. And yeah, I mean, there has been no footage released of Jared Lee Loughner that I have ever found. And the only thing that I have seen is courtroom drawings of this man. We haven't seen an ounce of any of the crime scene videotape release, nor anything where he's in court. And, it surprises me because Tucson is a pretty big city. And the times that he allegedly was at the courthouse on his court dates, I have seen pictures of the usual victims and whatnot, but I have not. I guess I am surprised that the courtroom was never packed with, a lot of the newspaper offices out there trying to get 1 ounce of live footage of a man who gunned down all these people.
That's what I'm saying. Normally these photographers and reporters are like vultures on fresh meat in the middle of the desert. They're all over it. They're trying to get pictures, the paparazzi, whoever. Yet I haven't seen one still photo of this guy in a jumpsuit and chains. Ladies and gentlemen, break coming up. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. More with my guest, Stephanie Sledge, when we get back. I won't pretend to be an expert on everything, and that's why I often bring guests on who I consider to be experts on certain subjects. And I must say that Stephanie is definitely an expert on this whole Jared Lee Loughner, Gabrielle Gifford's crazy weirdness. It keeps, this rabbit hole just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, every time I look at this, and I knew it was shady from the get-go. I knew there had to be more to it. I knew there had to be a handler, perhaps the person that did the shooting, if his name really is Jared Lee Loughner or whatever. He, mind controlled. Wouldn't surprise me. It's almost like their playbook. That I've seen this before. So that end didn't surprise me. But upon further investigation, looking into things, especially the stuff that you've showed me, it's just like, whoa, wow. I mean, what are they covering up? If to go to this extent, you know what I mean, Stephanie? The extent that they go to, like we were talking during the break, you'll go back and you'll be reading an article or something, an obituary, whatever, about one of the victims, let's say, from the shooting. And you'll go to, you'll read it and you go, okay, you take little notes and you're like, you know what, let me go back and I want to see that again because maybe I forgot something. So you go back to look at it again to compare with your notes and suddenly that obituary is gone. Or a testimony from a witness that said something is now pulled down. Whether it's video or news articles, I seem to find this a lot. And if you see this, to me, that's a big red flag because that shows that somebody's going back and doing damage control and cleaning up their tracks.
Well, that is correct. I mean, damage control has been used several times in this case. And like I said last week, they messed up from the very beginning and they had to go back and clean up an entire mess. And they were hoping that nobody was watching. And so this is, there's a lot of videos that had originally come out following the shooting that were posted on YouTube. A lot of them were from, a lot of the corporate media like ABC and CBS and CNN. And one thing that I found was that most of the time they were usually up a couple of months, if even less than that. And then, they've disappeared. And even other sites that have reposted videos, they have come up missing. And there was a video originally that had come out following the shooting. It was the only video that I had ever seen. And I actually saved it on my computer. And later it came up missing on my computer. And I don't know, how it exactly came up missing, but the whole video was gone. But there was one other person on the internet on YouTube that had a video that it was a witness that had claimed that there was another shooter at the scene and that Jared Lee Loughner was originally also reported to be dead at the scene right after the shooting, following the shooting. And that video has been deleted in its entirety off the entire internet. Like, it cannot be found whatsoever. I did email the gentleman that had it posted, and he too told me that the video had come up missing off his computer.
And there's something else that's just pops out in that article you wrote. Agents worried ATF program connected to Loughner gun, meaning his gun came from the Fast and Furious program. Now, if that's true or not, we don't know. But the point is, there's actually an article from The Hill, a mainstream source, from June 15th, 2011, by the author's name is Jordy Yeager. Okay, and it's titled "Agents Worried ATF Program Connected to Loughner Gun." Now, Stephanie found an article or a link on freerepublic.com, which I'll throw in the chat room for everybody. But if you go read her article, the link is at the bottom of her article. You'll see it. So you can just go to her website and see the article, and it's got everything. But this is just, it's like an archive page of that original post. Okay, and it shows you that it did exist at one point. This was put up by The Hill. That was the author's name, and it was put up June 15th, 2011. And it's no longer there. The only place you'll see it is on, the archive of it on Free Republic. So that shows that she's not lying. This corroborates exactly what she's talking about. And I've seen this myself. This is actually why I started archiving videos and pulling stuff when I thought it was important. Every time there's a shooting, I always, the Loughner shooting, the one in the Sikh temple, the movie theater, all this stuff, I pull as many videos as I can right off the bat that come out. Because it's amazing how within 2 or 3 days, stuff just disappears off the internet. Witness testimonies gone. Suddenly the witnesses are gagged by the judge. Like I brought up last week, one of the biggest smoking guns to me, Stephanie, is the fact that the FBI admits there's something like 200 videos from that day alone. The camera, people's cell phones, cameras, the security cameras around the place, the traffic cameras, all these different camera views, and yet not one of these videos has ever been released to the public. Why?
Well, we know why, because there's a cover-up, and so, they're not going to be released, just like all the other videos and all the other false flags that we've seen in the past. And unfortunately, that is, how these agencies are operating right now is, they believe they're above the law, where they can hold, pertinent information like this from the public. And so, it really does go to show you that, there is a cover-up taking place, or why would they go to all the extremes of deleting, all this information? And I truly do believe it's because, like I said, they did mess up from the get-go. They did not have their story straight. It just, it fell apart from the very beginning, and they really hoped that, nobody was watching or listening, and of course the majority of the public wasn't watching or wasn't listening, but there are those few that, really do have an interest in this case and saw beyond just the shooting.
And but wasn't this the first of these mass shootings that have taken place since Obama came into office? And I'm not just saying that he masterminded it, because he's a puppet too. But his, their branch of idiots, their little organized crime group, there seems to have been a uptick of mass shootings while he's been the president. And I believe, if I'm correct, that wasn't this the first one since when he was in office? And then it's almost like this was their first go at it, is what I'm getting at. And they learned from their mistakes, and as each one progressed, it's kind of the same template, but they tried to get a little better with it each time almost, if you look. From as it progressed from this to the movie theater shooting to the Sikh temple shooting, because all three of them reek of cover-up, and there's more to the story. By the time they got to the third one, the guy offs himself at the scene, right? So now there's no one left. So now you don't have to worry about like Loughner or this other kid with the movie theater shooting, about putting him through court and video cameras and slapping, the press in the face and saying, no, you can't come in the courtroom, and banning them and putting orders on the witnesses, telling them to shut their mouths, the gag orders. So you don't have to worry about that if the guy pops himself in the head, right? Because now there's not going to be a trial. He's guilty and he's been judged, done and over. Now we just have to try to prevent it, Stephanie. And how can we prevent it? Oh, let's take all the guns away from everybody, because that'll solve anything. Let's be honest. If more people had guns, if everybody was armed in that parking lot where Giffords was shot, or in that movie theater, things would have been much different. Things would have been much better, especially in the case of the Giffords shooting. he would have come running through the lot, started capping people, and he might have gotten the judge and maybe Gabby, and by that time, everybody else would have just opened fire on the guy, and it would have been end of story, and you wouldn't have to worry about what happened. All right, we're going to break. We'll be right back in a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. During the break, Stephanie and I were having this awesome conversation, which normally happens. A lot of times the conversation just continues during the break, and sometimes you can't help it because it's hard to, when you're on a train of thought, it's hard to turn it off. And Stephanie, you brought up a really good point. You started bringing up the whole aspect of mind control. And I talk about this often, but when I say mind control, I mean the accessing of the compartment that was created through the trauma-based mind control event of 9/11. And I've talked about this on air before, how part of the reason of 9/11 was to create that compartment, because when you go through a traumatic event, and they discovered this, scientists discovered this, that when we go through a traumatic event, it gets compartmentalized inside of our brains. And what they did was they created this event, pumped up this false patriotism, made you connect emotionally with it, and it's still inside all of us that were around and can remember that day. Okay, so what they do is there's certain times that they go in and they open the door to that compartment and they reach in and they grab a little bit of that and they attach it to things. And Stephanie pointed out how they brought the 9/11 into the whole Jared Lee Loughner shooting. Now, I know we went over it last week a little bit, but I want to bring it up again because this is super, super important. Stephanie, can you give the listeners, in case they didn't hear the broadcast last week or catch it on Rebroad or the archive or the YouTube archive, could you explain a little bit again how the 9/11 aspect, how they brought it, Obama used it as a way to pull on those emotional strings, because he did, after all, need another Oklahoma City event, right? Isn't that what one of his crew said, that he, on Hardball with Chris Matthews, I think it was, that he needed another Oklahoma City style event?
Well, it is true, and Obama has lost a majority of his ratings since he took office. And Mark Penn said in an interview on Hardball, and I quote, "Obama needs another Oklahoma City bombing in order to reconnect with the people. Clinton reconnected with the people after the Oklahoma City bombing, and so Obama needs a similar incident to reconnect if he finds that right moment," unquote. And so it really does make sense why they brought 9/11 to Tucson. And what they did was they marked their territory. And so Tucson is now a marked location for 9/11. And, you know, it was a PSYOP. It was the 10th year anniversary. And they wanted to play on the emotions of the American people. And one of the ways that they did that was to bring 9/11 into this. And, you know, 9/11 had a lot to do with, not only is it, you know, on 9/11, but also when we call emergency, we dial 911. And so there's a lot of, 9/11 plays a lot on heroism with our police and also with our fire departments. And so, you know, we relate 9/11 to all the firemen and the police that were killed on the day of 9/11. And so that's exactly what happened in Tucson was they brought the flag of remembrance, the 9/11 flag of remembrance, to Tucson. And it was kind of like watching false superheroes. And that's exactly what they're doing is, as part of the PSYOP that they're doing is, you know, they're indoctrinating the police and fire departments and the public into, you know, having such a superficial belief about, you know, that they're all heroes, and they play on that. It's part of the PSYOP, and it's been going on for many years. And so 9/11 just happens to be, you know, it happens to be what we connect with the most because it was such a, you know, it was such an emotional trauma on the nation. And so they had to continue the PSYOP and bring it to 9/11 so that Obama could boost his ratings.
And in case people think, oh, are you bashing firemen, Papa? Are you bashing cops? No. You have to understand, they're creating in the society, in the mindset, this hero worship that you must have somebody to come save you. You need a savior. And at the same time, if you notice, this savior all works for some, for government, for lack of a better term, in some way, shape, or form. Even if you don't think you work for government, if you're a fireman or an EMT, you kind of do, because you're paid for by taxes through the city, so you are working somewhat for the government. And I was a firefighter for 6 years, so I'm not bashing any first responders or anything like that. That's not it. What they're doing is they're creating this superhero idol worship in people's minds through mind control, and what they want people to look to someone to save them is what they're trying to do. They don't want you to look to yourself for the solution and be responsible and have some personal responsibility, because that, at the end of the day, that's what would turn this whole thing around in like 3.5 minutes. But they don't want that. So they have to make you, it's like an appeal to authority. That's the way I see it. It's like they're pushing the appeal to authority. I am the president. I am, Obama comes in with his cape. I mean, right after he got elected, let's look at this. Right after he got elected, do you remember all the pictures of him, Stephanie, where he was pulling his suit open and he's got the Superman suit underneath, with the O on it from Obama, and he's ready to fly out there, and what did he say in his acceptance speech? I'm from Krypton, I'm from the planet Krypton, and I'm here to save the planet, or whatever. That's literally creating that idol worship. So that people have to, oh, please, Obama, you tell me what to do. What? I have to report on my neighbor to be safe? Okay, I'll do that, no problem. And if it's not Obama, it'll be Mitt Romney. It doesn't matter. They're all puppets. They're not... It's like watching a huge game of chess when you sit back and you look at it. What say you, Stephanie?
Well, I agree with you, but, I personally do have friends that are police officers, and I know many people that are in the fire departments, and I have a lot of respect for these people, and so I don't want people to get the impression that I don't think that people should have respect for them, because they do deserve respect. I mean, especially they put their lives in danger and whatnot, and so. But what I'm trying to say really is that there has been I guess, kind of a real-life reality show that's been taking place with people that have been placed in the public eye as superheroes. And, of course, they have to continue this. It's part of the agenda. And they cannot finish their legislation until they get what they want. In order for them to do that, they have to trick the public into believing that the superheroes that have come forward are what we need to worship. And it's relived through 9/11 and other false flags and whatnot. But I think as far as Obama, that he has been, placed to bring forth, an image that I believe is false. And so we're seeing a lot of this, and especially the Jared Lee Loughner case, where there's a lot of superheroes, I call superheroes, that are rising in the public eye. And of course, they are promoting an image that really is false. And so that's why I believe that this is a psyop.
It even if I know some people might say it's too hard to believe because there's a lot to it, but I got to tell you, the more I look at this, because as I said earlier, I knew something stunk with the whole case, but I had called out that I thought he was probably mind controlled. I always said, where are the videos, where's this? But then when I started looking into your work, and then as I was reading through what you've put out. And it's not, by the way, it's not you just saying this and coming up with this theory out of nowhere. you have links to credible sources for everything, and I'm amazed because the level of the cover-up. See, I always say, pay attention to how they handle it. Even if the situation itself looks to be shady, one of the most telling things I find is how the powers that be handle it, and how they or mishandle it, I should say. That's one of the big red flags. In this case, it was really mishandled. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. And this case, as I have said previously, it just goes so deep. I mean, no matter where you look, there's connections to other things that are pretty well known, which actually Stephanie's going to touch on in hour number 2. But this whole Loughner character himself, the pictures that we're seeing, I want to focus on this for a second, because to me this is another one of the red flags of this whole thing. Is you always, again, the only pictures I've ever seen is this psycho picture of him. Like, the only live photo I've ever seen is that psycho, eyes a bulging, bald head picture of him. I have yet to ever see a picture of him, as looking like a normal human being. And, if you shave anybody's head with a Bic razor and, gave them a certain amount of drugs, or, taped their eyelids up, glued their eyelids up for a photo or whatever, I mean, you could really make someone look scary. Or how about they just get someone that's not him at all? This is a big thing that a lot of his friends say that's not him. The witnesses said that's not him. And where this, again, dovetails with, where are the videos from that day? If they need people to buy into that that's Jared and it's not somebody else, then they would need to remove all the videos. And then that goes to show you the level of the cover-up. Like I said, coming into break, the level of the cover-up. If you look at how things are handled, look at the BP oil spill, right? Look how they handled that. Look at Fukushima. Look at other things. If they handle it and cover it up, there's more going on than they're telling you. Otherwise, they shouldn't have any issue just telling you what's going on, right? So why the level with this? And Steph, I got to tell you, this really blows my mind, because the more I look into this, there's just so much to this case. I mean, there's some really, this thing starts to go off in a few different directions, and it can get a little crazy. Some people might say, is this real? But I got to tell you, the articles that you've written, and you don't go out, you're not like, oh, aliens did it or anything like that. She's not talking anything like that. But the stuff that she talks about does delve into mind control and other things, which we even talked about last week, like suspended animation. And I know I asked you if you thought that they used Gabby Giffords as an experiment, or whether it was conveniently or they did it on purpose, who knows. But this really goes off in a whole bunch of different directions. And mind control is one of the biggest things, to me anyway, that sticks out about this whole case, because he looks like, just without, I'm trying to keep it family friendly, but he looks crazy. Okay, he looks out of his mind in that photo. But how do we know that that's him? How do we know that that's not some, mind controlled puppet that's just standing there? That's not, you know what I mean? How do we know? And let me ask you this: do you think we'll ever find out the truth?
That's hard to say, but it's highly unlikely, considering, look at how many years the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, it's been 15 years since that happened, and have we found out the truth about that? Not really. I mean, not until the recent documentary that was released called A Noble Lie. I haven't heard anything. So why would this case really be any differently? I really don't think that a lot of this stuff is going to be released or exposed, simply because look at how many people might, be in some serious trouble over the PSYOP. And so I highly doubt that they're going to tell on themselves. And, as far as the pictures go, I found it suspect from the very beginning. And if I recall, I believe it was September of 2008 that Jared Loughner did report to the Foothills Police Department that his identity had been stolen. And I believe it was when a faked MySpace page was discovered. And he did file a report, and he claimed that he looked it up on PQ and found a page that had an old picture of him. And there was another picture, which he had longer hair, and he claimed that picture of him was in fact him, but the MySpace page wasn't from him. And so he reported that to the police, and he did put in the police report that he thought his friend Alex had done it. And of course, interestingly, Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, they were the owners of MySpace, and they quickly sold the MySpace company just 5 months after the shooting. And I believe New York Times is the one that had originally put that article out about the sale. But what was most interesting is that it sold for $35 million to a company that was called Specific Media. And Rupert Murdoch had sold the MySpace company for $545 million less than what he paid for it. So it was a quick sell. They wanted to get rid of it. And we've seen that in a lot of the false flags, that some of the identities of these patsies have been reported stolen ahead of time. And I believe even in some of the 9/11 hijackers that some of their identities were reported stolen too. So
they were.
So
a couple of them were shown and proved to be alive after the fact, and yet our government still, they actually were issued apology letters by the United States government, some of them, but yet you don't have, I think it was the State Department that issued him like a letter of apology, but yet you don't have, the official narrative still claims that it was these, 19 hijackers. It's just, where's the same thing on 9/11, another thing, passenger manifest. How come the passenger manifest don't have any Middle Eastern names on them? But no, it's not a conspiracy. No. It's amazing how everything ties together. Did you notice it's like they at a base level they use the same playbook and then they don't really change much from it?
Well, they can only go so far until they finally get caught. And, they really have been really sloppy. And, I think that they believe that most of the, journalists or investigators are all owned by the corporate media. But, it really goes to show that, these things can be picked up. Like, this is not, they are not so huge where they can't make mistakes and not be found out. And this was exactly one of them. And this was based on a police report. And also one of the things that I found extremely interesting is the very first picture that was released of Jared Lee Loughner, as far as the mugshot goes, that had been put out by Pima County. One of the things that they did during the first couple of weeks was there was a political fight that had taken place, and it was all across the mainstream media, and I'm sure most people remember it, but it was just quite ridiculous, and Sarah Palin and everybody else got involved, and the left was blaming the right, and the right was blaming the left. But one of the things that they did blame was radio hosts. And I found it quite humorous that Jared Lee Loughner's picture, his first picture release, does resemble Glenn Beck. And if you do a side-by-side comparison, and I believe that the Truther Girls is one of the radio shows that originally had released a comparison, or showed a comparison anyway, of Jared Lee Loughner and Glenn Beck side by side, and they really do look identical right down to the shadow. So, and the second picture that was released, he looks real military style or maybe police style. He didn't have a cut on his head in the first picture, but the second picture he has a cut on his head, which would definitely coincide with what I spoke about last week, how one of the witnesses, Joe Zamudio, had claimed that he had tackled the gunman and that he was bleeding off the top of his head. But then, of course, in another AP press, witnesses had claimed that he had tackled the wrong guy and was yelling at him, telling him that he had tackled the wrong guy. So in the second one that they released, they had to put a bruise on his head. But to me, he looks real military or police, type. And I do not think that it's Jared Lee Loughner at all.
And I can't believe the level this goes to, because I like exactly what you just brought to the Glenn Beck thing. That made a light go off in my head. That's another way, subliminally, of getting people to associate talk radio with homegrown terrorism or homegrown extremism or death or personal injury. Right. Kind of like Oklahoma City and how they were right off the bat, the Clinton administration blamed talk radio. And remember, a lot of the same people in talk radio, a lot of the same people the same people in talk radio, some of them are around, but the same people from the Clinton administration behind the scenes are involved. A lot of them are involved either as advisors or however with the Obama administration. So again, it's like the same playbook over and over and over again. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hour one up, hour two coming up. Don't go anywhere. Go check out Stephanie's website during the break, thegovernmentrag.com. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. And tonight I am graced with Stephanie Sledge's presence yet again. And I say that because she is an amazing lady, if you haven't figured that out already. She's very smart, she's very awake, and she's the real deal. And that's why, as I said in hour number 1, I support her work, and I urge you, if you want to support an independent journalist, someone who doesn't make money, she doesn't make thousands and thousands of dollars, she doesn't even make hundreds of dollars off of this. She ends up paying more out of her pocket for everything than she brings in. Anything that goes into her just helps support her work. And websites are not cheap. And if you want more than 20 people to be able to get on the website, in about an hour's time, then sometimes bandwidth costs a little more money. So I urge you to help her out. Go check out her website, thegovernmentrag.com. And you can, if you donate, was it over $25, Stephanie? If they donate, they get the over 400-page report on the whole Loughner investigation?
Yeah, $23.
Oh, there you go. See, it's even less. But give her 25, make it an even 25. Just call it a day. Bam, she'll give you the report, and you can get the report for 23. But throw her 25, get the report, and that way you have the evidence. I always say it's good to have all the evidence, right? So you have the evidence. It's not like you're not getting anything in return, and that money helps support her do more investigations. Because, by the way, she's not a one-trick pony. She doesn't just investigate the Gabrielle Giffords thing and then call it a day and go on about her daily life. She's actually very into what's going on. She's very attuned to what's going on. Just like I urge the listeners to do, she's on, as she learns, she's learning about like natural, homeopathic things, you could say, organic stuff, everything. She's on the same path and journey that we all are on. So, she's the real deal, but she's definitely not a one-trick pony either. Steph, you are just plugged into everything that's going on. During the break, we were talking about, health, and we were talking about, living out in the middle of nowhere, because I'm currently getting ready to move my stuff. See, I practice what I preach, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I always say, hey, if you can, try to, unplug as much as you can, try to get back, I guess, I don't want to say commune with nature, but learn to be to live more with nature, I guess, not to be so dependent on the matrix. And I'm doing just that. If I'm going to urge you to do it, then I have to do it myself. And I'm moving out into the middle of Nowheresville. And I'm, you can't even see the place I'm moving to Google Earth. When you look, you can't see it at all. It's covered by trees. So that's exactly what I want. Not that I'm trying to hide out, but I want to get back to the country. I'm tired of living near the city. And I think a lot of this craziness that we see and we have to deal with, whether it's the shootings with Loughner, 9/11, any of this stuff, I think a lot of this, there's a lot of pressure on us already, you know what I mean, with seeing this, being exposed to this kind of stuff, especially 24 hours a day. And then when you're in the city, there's just even more pressure. And I've said all the time, for personal health reasons, I always urge the listeners to get back, try to get out the country and everything else. So I'm practicing what I'm preaching, and I'm doing it. And I was interested to find out, talking to Stephanie off air, that she's very much into a lot of this stuff. She's not just somebody that stumbled upon this Jared Lee Loughner thing. You really know a lot about, you understand, you're awake. You get 9/11, you understand false flag terror. You really get the whole shebang, don't you, Steph?
Well, I don't know if I get everything, but I'm learning. And yeah, my husband and I and our family, we try to live a simple life. And I think that's really important right now when we go through these really hard times. And it is very important to learn how to be self-sustained and, just little things. And I also live in a small community, which I'm really grateful for. The community that I live in is a really good community, and people genuinely do care about each other. And so I am grateful that I'm where I'm at right now. And, we try to do simple things too. Like, we're trying to change our life, with our health and teach our children. We're in the process of getting chickens. I mean, we are self-employed. I mean, we really are trying to live the life that we were meant to live. And so it's a blessing, to be honest with you.
And would you say when you first woke up, or when you realized something was weird, as you progressed, isn't it much easier? Wouldn't you say it's much easier to start to spot a lot of these red flags? Like in this case, you saw the whole Gabrielle Gifford shooting and everything, and you said, something isn't right. I find that on your journey, as you progress, it's easier to see through the veil of crap. You know what I mean? Like, I can't watch mainstream media anymore. I end up yelling at the television. So I don't even have cable. I turned that off. I only have internet, and that's it. Otherwise, I'd go nuts.
Well, that's the same here. And we don't have TV at our house, and our kids enjoy their lives. And that is the thing that I am grateful for. I did grow up that way, though. My family was very, they believed in self-supporting the family and, using the family as a means of help and just leaning on each other. And I am really grateful that I have a family that believes that as well. And so I woke up one day and I knew that my job was to investigate this case. And so, I basically just followed what my heart was. And so here I am today. And I am grateful that things have been given to me and people have been put into my life to help, promote the truth and to get the word out, because I do believe that America is in an emergency situation. And, so the faster the truth can get out, the faster people can understand. And then, when you talk to people and they're having a really rough time, or they may not understand what's going on in their lives and they're having a really rough time, a lot of times, if you can just listen and be compassionate and relate some of this information that we hear in current events as, what might be happening in their daily lives that might be causing their hardships, then it's a lot easier to communicate with people. And I find that in my own community as well, that people are open, they know something's wrong. And so, the first thing that you have to do really is to just lend an ear. And when you lend the ear, people are they're easily awakened, because then they can relate, they finally have a way to relate, to what's going on.
Yeah, I find if you move to small communities, and it doesn't happen with every, and not everybody's neighbor is going to be nice. But I find that if you move to a small community, a lot of times when you get to know your neighbor, you have more of a connection, and that actually gives you more security to get through any situation, whether it be a natural disaster or whatever. It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be generally be some sort of government created thing. You could just have like a bad snowstorm. Maybe you live in a place that gets a lot of snow or whatever. Or hurricanes, like where I live currently, we have hurricanes a lot. And when we went through, we had Katrina, Rita, and Wilma all in the same year. And when Wilma came through here, we didn't have power for 2 weeks. But the neighbors in my part and everybody around us were all in our apartment complexes. People had grills. Some people had the food. Some people had the drinks. And everybody came together and worked together. And we got through it with 2 weeks of no power and no food and stuff. So I think it really is a good idea to, have community and get together. And that's actually one of the things they're trying to mentally go after when they do things like this whole shooting event, because they're trying to get everybody scared of each other. Like, everybody could be a nut. If you have a gun, you could be a crazy person. Oh my God, just more division. Their end goal is to keep everybody afraid of each other and divided on so many levels that everybody's by themselves and nobody's connected to other people. And then that way they're easier to control. Especially if they're in fear, because then they have no one to turn to to give them strength. It really is ingenious when you step back and look at it, how they control us. It really is. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few minutes. During the break, Stephanie and I were talking about the Loughner investigation again. And the reason why, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that I got a little off on that tangent last segment was because as I said to Stephanie during the break, we talk about so much doom and gloom. I think sometimes it's good to talk about just a little bit of good, and even if it's not related to what it was in a sense. I connected it, but it's good to have a little bit of good information too, instead of always being raw. Because this stuff is really hardcore, especially what we've been talking about, because this thing goes really, really deep. So I just wanted to put a little positivity out as well as bringing you doom and gloom. But getting back into the Loughner shooting, during the break, Stephanie brought up a good point. She was talking about the Aurora, Colorado shooting and how the guy had 6,000 rounds of ammo. And in some cases, if somebody's a hunter or whatever, that's not a lot of ammo. The general public who is brain dead and out of, the people that live in cities that aren't used to guns maybe, but if you live out in the country, that's not a lot of ammo to have. But that reminded me of a good point, and I wanted to touch on this on air. Loughner, he had the 33 round magazines for the Glock, and everybody, it was immediately, we have to ban high capacity magazines, right? The same thing, it was the same verbiage that came up after the Aurora, Colorado shooting. It was the exact same crap. The anti-gun crowd with the, we have to ban high-capacity magazines because the guy supposedly had a beta mag for the AR he had. And it was an AR or AK, I think it was an AR he had. And he had like 6,000 rounds of ammo just for his pistol alone. And everybody was like, he bought it all online. And conveniently, there was a bill waiting to ban online sales of ammunition and everything else. It's like, come on, please. If you look at this and then you look at the legislation they have waiting, like if I didn't know about the legislation and I was brain dead, maybe I could understand how the wool would be pulled over my eyes. But when I understand the legislation they have waiting and then I see the same thing, Loughner, 33 round mags. Oh my God, end of the world, ban high capacity magazines. This kid, ban high capacity magazines and online ammunition sales. It's like as soon as you see what they're saying, you know what the end goal is. The smoke wasn't even done coming out of the barrels of the guns, and they were calling for this. It's just you can tell by the way they handle it again what their agenda really is, and then you have to look at things when you see them starting to use things like this. Then you have to go back and look at the situation and say, does this smell? And then when you look at this situation, it stinks to high heaven, which leads me to the little girl. Now, you really blew my mind with some information. about the little girl last week and all this other stuff. But there's even more to her, right? There's even more weirdness to this little girl. And the little girl I'm talking about was the one that was conveniently, she was killed, and she was born on 9/11, the day itself. Now, who knows? It could very well be a coincidence, right? Or maybe there's more to it, like Stephanie said. So, Stephanie, there's other stuff that's involved with the weirdness, and that actually leads to or dovetails or comes close to the whole Sandusky thing. What's the deal with that? What more weirdness could you possibly have found with this little, what was her name? What was the little girl's name? Christina, I think it was.
Yeah, it was Christina Taylor Green. And before I touch on that, I'd like to say something, though, that does relate to Christina Taylor Green and her grandfather, who was Dallas Green. And Dallas Green was a former pitcher, manager, and I believe he was an executive in the major leagues. And after he graduated from the University of Delaware, he signed on as a pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies, and that was from 1960 to 67. And then again in 67, I believe, by a scout. And then he played, for the Washington Senators, which later became the Texas Rangers, and I believe he played for the Mets in 1966. But basically what it was he had some interesting quotes that he said following the shooting, and it goes right along with what you were just saying about his Glock. And he did, I can quote this for you, but one of the things that I found very interesting about, and this was his, what he said following the shooting about his granddaughter, Christina Taylor Green, but one of the things that he said really sparked my attention, and he said, and I'll quote this, he said, "You would hope there would be some understanding that there are crazies in this world. I guess the one thing that I can get through my mind, even though I'm a hunter and love to shoot, and I love to have my guns, I don't have a Glock or whatever it is. I don't have a magazine with 33 bullets in it. That doesn't make sense to be able to sell those kinds of things." And one of the things that particular statement led me to research Dallas Green a little bit more, because the fact that he was actually promoting the banning of guns, instead of talking about what happened to his granddaughter, and maybe even expressing some anger about Jared Lee Loughner, he immediately went to the Glock 19 and the extended magazine. And so that is a lot of the things that we do see in the false flags, is immediately, there are certain agendas, and a lot of times they do come from, the people, a lot of times people in the event or closely related to the event that are pushing for the gun control. So I found that interesting. But also, back to what you were saying about Sandusky, that is an interesting point that I found in this case. And one of the things is that Dallas Green did begin his managerial career for the Philadelphia Phillies, and that was from 1979 to 81. And then he was the general manager of the Chicago Cubs from 82 to 87. And then in 89, he became the manager of the New York Yankees. But when he was the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, one thing that I found, extremely interesting was the fact that the owner of the Philadelphia Phillies at that time was Ruly Carpenter, and Ruly Carpenter was listed as an honorary board member of the Second Mile Foundation. And the Second Mile Foundation was founded by Jerry Sandusky, and I don't have my notes with me, but I believe it was 1977 when he found the foundation. And of course, we know that Sandusky, some of us believe that Sandusky, was a patsy type, where, he's ultimately getting the blame for, what many researchers believe is a high-profile pedophile ring. And Sandusky did molest children and used the Second Mile Foundation as his front for, abusing these children. And really Carpenter was on the honorary board, and it was at the same time that Dallas Green was the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies. So there is an affiliation there, a close affiliation as far as the Second Mile and Jerry Sandusky. And then also, too, Graham Spanier was I believe he was the chancellor of Penn State University. But before that, he was also, I believe he was the chancellor, he was either the chancellor or the vice chancellor of the University of Omaha, Lincoln. And of course, that was deeply involved with the Franklin cover-up. And so there are associations there with the little girl and her grandfather, and close ties to this pedophile ring that's been uncovered in the last 25 years.
Just jaw-dropping information. Just jaw-dropping information. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to get her over 400-page report to check it out. It's just amazing the stuff she's uncovered. TheGovernmentRag.com. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that's just, to me, it's explosive. Well, it doesn't surprise me, but it's like, to me, that's one of the most powerful info tool, I don't want to say info tool, but info whatever, piece of information, bomb-dropping, explosive information, that this stuff goes back to Sandusky, and not even if it links to him directly, but it links, this stuff all seems to link back to the same stuff. The Franklin cover-up, you'll see the same, even if it just comes close to it and brushes by. It might not have a direct link, might be, 6 degrees of separation, but somehow it's connected to what I'm getting at is the same thing comes up. Pedophilia. These Satanists, or whatever you want to call them, doing rituals with these kids to whatever the hell they're worshiping. Satan, demons, whatever, reptiles from planet Saturn, whatever. Doesn't matter what they're at the moment. The point is, this stuff really happens. The McMartin school incident. And not many people like Ted Gunderson. I know he did some things that pissed people off, and some people idolize him. Whatever. The point is, that when his work with the McMartin school stuff was really creepy, which led to the FBI saying that satanic ritual abuse didn't exist and it was fake. And that then the whole False Memory Foundation came into play and all this other stuff. I mean, why the cover-up of this stuff? And when you look into some certain things, and anything linked with mind control seems to be linked to these rituals, the satanic, whatever the hell they're doing, these satanic groups, Luciferians, whatever the frig you want to call them. All this stuff seems to dovetail into one another. I mean, the further you look, Boys Town, the Franklin cover-up, all of this stuff, it's really, it's very telling if I'm investigating something and I seem to stumble across the same thing over and over and over and over again, that usually draws a red flag. What say you, Stephanie?
It's definitely a red flag in all of this. And, there is a lot of tiebacks in this case that do have a lot to do with the same people and the same psyop, and it has to make you wonder, how if it is the same, infiltration that is doing it. And what I mean by that is really the simple fact that our government and military have admitted that our military has been infiltrated by terrorists, and that can be looked up and verified. I believe that it was last year, and so we have to wonder, are a lot of these psyops, what exactly, who is doing it? And a lot of the information in my report, does go in deeper into a lot of who I believe are part of the psyop, and I found it quite interesting. Back to Loughner, his mom was also really suspect, and the reason why I believe that she, had a lot of shadiness to her, I guess, and really the only pictures that we've seen of Loughner's parents, they really do look like a a well-placed couple, issued clothing, glasses. I mean, it looks like staged photos to me. And while I was out in Tucson, I did visit Loughner's house. And one of the things that I noticed was that they had installed a big box around their front door so that people could not go to the door and knock. And they also replaced the mailbox with a heavy-duty locked mailbox, and I suppose it was probably because people were maybe trying to find out, if the Loughners really lived there, or maybe looking through their mail and stuff. But one of the things about Loughner's mom that I found quite humorous, to tell you the truth, was following the shooting, she was allegedly detained by law enforcement. And, that was for questioning about her son following the shooting. Right away, she was detained in law enforcement. And she had emailed, while she was in law enforcement, she claimed that she had just borrowed a laptop and went to the bathroom while she was in law enforcement custody, and that she had emailed Freedom Fighter. And she, in this email that Freedom Fighter had posted on their blog, she professed her sorrows about her son and his mental illness. And in a later email, she also demonized her husband. And so I found it interesting that as I was following these alleged emails that Loughner's mom had emailed to Freedom Fighter, later in the comments section, a Dr. DJ Chandler, who was a mental health professional who had a top DOD clearance. And she also has close ties to UCLA and Peace Corps, the World Health Organization, the Rockefeller and the Ford Foundations, Cornell. I believe her father won like the Food Prize Award. And so she's got a lot of really deep ties, but she began to post poems, and she injected a lot of comments about mental health agenda. And so back to, the infiltration, these are psyops, and that's exactly what that means. These are well-placed people that go on and, their roles are to push the agenda and to bring about emotions. And so mental health was picked as the psyop in this case.
And there's a lot of agendas. There's not just one thing they benefit from. The mental health thing is another aspect. They could use it to push all these different measures for gun control. Let's say, and it wouldn't just be gun control, because they would use this to, advance other political agendas that they could with it. But let's say the main focus was gun control, right? Well, they're attacking it from multiple angles. You have the high, the ammo, the high capacity magazines that they don't want, and then the crazy aspect of it, the mental health aspect of it. We have to prevent crazies from getting guns. And you hear this often said by politicians. We don't need more gun control. We just need to stop the wrong people from getting them. Well, you can't tell if someone's crazy until they go and, you can't tell if someone's going to go shoot up a restaurant or whatever the hell they do and have some mass shooting until they do it. You can't predict the future. So what are you trying to push? Pre-crime? Are you trying to push that we have to mentally test everybody? You have to pass a mental health test to get a firearm. And then what happens if they ask you a question? What happens if one of the flag questions for them is, do you trust government? Well, then what? Then you don't get a gun? So that's a really important thing. That's a big red flag there, is pushing the mental health agenda and trying to, because right after the shooting, that was another thing that you started hearing them say, well, we have to stop crazy people from getting guns because look, they attack congressmen and everything. And then didn't they pass some legislation protecting congressmen and stuff and these elected officials? Weren't they able to pass that you can't protest in front of federal buildings or whatever anymore, not too long after? For some reason, I remember they passed so much police state legislation, it's actually hard to keep up with it all. But for some reason, I remember them passing some sort of legislation after this to protect themselves from, the citizens, and make it harder for citizens to speak with them. I have to go look it up, but again, they benefit on multiple levels. You know, I always say, look, if you want to know whether or not it was just some random nutbag or if it was a setup, a psyop for something bigger and to push an agenda, look at how they react to it. If they really, really wanted to do the right thing, what they would say is, look, because if it was just some random act of violence, they say, look, what this guy did was wrong. You know, it's a shame some people died. It's blah, 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 blah. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of other people. Don't be afraid of guns. It happens. That's why more of us need to be armed so that if something does happen like this again, more people will be armed and have the chance to stop. You know, you can't stop a madman from pulling a gun out and shooting people, but you can drop the amount of people he kills by a large number if more people are armed and can defend themselves. You can't know if someone's going to do something, but they're pushing it. And again, the mental health thing, that leads to the whole pre-crime thing, which then you have to look at that movie with, what's his name? Tom Cruise, Minority Report. I mean, is that the future we're going to have because someone's afraid of some nut with a gun? Maybe. We're going to break, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. Final segment coming up. Don't go anywhere. Susan Hilleman. This is a name that Stephanie brought up to me during the break, and she was telling me some stuff about this lady. And we don't have much time left. And I think that this is a point that this is another one of those things that it's like, wow, when you look into it. So, Steph, I'm going to give you the floor. Who is Susan Hilleman, and why is she something that should be paid attention to and investigated in this case?
Well, Susan Hilleman was a alleged victim in this case. She was a close neighbor to Christina Taylor Greene, and they had a relationship like a grandma-granddaughter type relationship according to all the AP reports. And she was allegedly shot 3 times at the scene that day, but she had brought Christina Taylor Greene to the scene. And one of the things that I found really interesting about her was the fact that she does have a lot of history in Cornell University and human ecology and MK Ultra, and she resides on the board of Cornell University. But also, too, she was involved in a study, and she used to be a social worker. I believe she's retired now, but she spent many years being a social worker. And she also participated in a study about multiple personality disorders. And it was about the disassociation of the mind. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the relation to the psyop and how butterflies are generally a symbol of mind control or, anything that has to do with the mind control programs. And I believe a lot of subjects and victims who are in these types of programs are either tattooed with the monarch butterfly, or the butterfly represents, the new conscious within someone, which is a lot of the disassociation. And so one of the things about this psyop was that is what it was meant to do. It was a massive psyop on an entire nation. It wasn't just on Jared Lee Loughner or any other people in this event. It was for the whole nation. And, they do create these disorders. It is proven that a lot of the multiple personality disorders or disassociations are caused by massive abuse. And some of them are inflicted, in these mind control projects. And so that's what this nation experienced, was to disassociate the mind. And the butterflies were brought up. Christina Taylor Greene's mother sells butterflies now, some of them with the Never Forget, with the 9/11 flag in the background. And so, this was a psyop that went deep into, it was a mass experiment on the nation. And so, the more people that they can get on these mental health agendas and on medications and stuff, this keeps a lot of the private companies that have the mental health industry and, of course, the private prisons and whatnot in business. And, in my opinion, I believe it is the new way to drug deal, and that this the drug war is not just between the cartels, dealing the marijuana or whatnot on the borders. It also is a deep drug dealing operation that's taking place deep inside of our hospitals and, many government agencies.
I agree. And it does push, it pushes, you got to have these drugs and the psychiatric end of it, which if you look into psychiatry and the study of mental health, that leads actually to German scientists in the late 1800s trying to figure out how to control the mind. So this all studied, psychiatry stemmed from the study of mind control. And then you have pills that make you pretty much a zombie now that doctors prescribe, like Pez. Was it A Brave New World where he talked about Soma and how they were, going to have these pills that made everybody, just pretty much brain dead, and they were all happy and didn't care about anything. And there's actually a real pill called Soma. And it has pretty much that effect. And that's... You see a lot of that being pushed too, and you're right. The drug wars are not only between the cartels; it's also between these big pharma companies too. Because at the end of the day, who actually dies of what drug do more people overdose on? It's prescription drugs. They're the bigger problem, right? But they go after the people that suffer pain and all this other stuff. They never actually go after the drug pushers themselves. And I think that a lot of this, it does have to do with the mental health agenda. And that's another good thing. We have, like you said, we got to stop the crazies. That's what they're pushing. And then that gets into how are they going to do that? Because a politician let's be real, the only way that they ever solve problems, they don't ever come up. First of all, this isn't a problem. It's a created problem. But the only way a politician can solve a problem is by passing a law. And it doesn't solve the problem. Creating a law is actually, it's almost like a byproduct of them not having a solution for the problem. So that's their solution, is to create this law. But the laws never really create a solution, right? Like, you can't convince people to put their seatbelt on so that when they, you have a better chance of surviving an accident if you have your seatbelt on, right? Well, it's hard to convince. Some people just don't want to do it. But rather than give people the free choice of doing it, because some people are getting killed and people are suffering emotionally because of it and blah, 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 they come after you and make you put that seatbelt on. Look, this is control of society. When you take a step back and you look at things, why would they have this PSYOP? Because they have so many agendas they want to push. Why would it end? And then, how can I be sure it's a PSYOP? Well, when you look into it, especially when you look into Stephanie's work, it blows your mind. I mean, this thing is so deep. There's so many different aspects to it. And if you understand how mind control works, I know some of this seems crazy to some people. I know some people would be like, wow, this is just too much. But honestly, if you research mind control, go research Project Monarch. I had Freeman on a couple weeks ago. We talked about this. Go research Project Monarch. Go research the other mind control experiments that fall under the umbrella of MK Ultra. Go read Kathy to understand the aspect of this. That I'm not talking about mind control of society, but of individuals, of how they do it in trauma-based mind control. Go read Kathy O'Brien's book. I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it again. Go read The Transformation of America by Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips, and then read Bryce Taylor's book, Thanks for the Memories. And you'll have a better understanding of how they can, trauma-based mind control. And then if you understand it on an individual scale, then you look at how they pull things off on a bigger scale, like 9/11 or Oklahoma City or this shooting. It's amazing how they control us. What do you think, Steph?
Well, definitely. I mean, that's what I was getting at, was that it's a giant PSYOP, and it was performed on the entire nation, and it's been happening since 9/11. In fact, 9/11 was the very first one that disassociated a lot of people in this nation, and that's exactly what they want. We've seen a rise in mental health agenda, and even just, people on all kinds of antipsychotics and antidepressants and anti-this and anti-that, and so we've seen this. This is the PSYOP. I mean, it's time for people to realize that, the mental health agenda is the PSYOP. It is to disassociate our minds to create mental health. And so as far as, the future in this industry has to survive on mental illness and more people. And so the more that they can create these PSYOPs that, disassociate the mind and split the personality, then, what they're doing is they're creating the symptoms that they can write down in the books. And so they can keep the agenda and the money flowing. And it is the new way to drug deal. And unfortunately, our government is deeply involved. And so, until people really rise up against this drug dealing war that's going on, two sides of a stick, I really think that the nation is just going to be drugged up. I mean, it really is alarming to me. On my daily basis, I go to work and I have people that visit my studio nonstop. And, the amount of people that come in that are on one drug or another just alarms me, and their children too. And so they have got to the younger generations and, of course, the veterans. And they want everybody on drugs from a young age all the way up to the veterans. And so it is a PSYOP to make us all lay down and give away our arms. It's also a PSYOP to, continue the research into the medical health agenda. And so until the nation wakes up out of their zombie state, it has to be addressed, because it's only going to get worse. The drug war is failing. And it is failing not only in the medical agenda field, but it's also failing, on the streets. And that is what the goal is, though. It is to disassociate our minds.
I agree, and I'll leave it with this because we're out of time. If you read Kathy O'Brien's book, you'll find out that the one drug that she was not allowed to have while under mind control, all she could have: heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, anything, alcohol. The one thing she was not allowed to have, and I shouldn't call it a drug, but the one substance she wasn't allowed to have was cannabis. Gee, I wonder why, and I wonder why they're so hard on it today, and they don't like people using it. I'll leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Stephanie, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I had a great time.
Ladies and gentlemen, check her website out and support her, thegovernmentrag.com. I'll see you all again on Friday. Till then, I love you all. No fear, only love. I'm out of here.